Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. First, I'd like to recognize Mrs. Karen Vedder, who traveled with her husband from Ohio to be down here today. For many years, I have been reading articles and books and information from Dr. Richard Vedder, but I never had the opportunity to meet with him, and it was one on my aspirational list. So yesterday, thankful to Matt Denhart, he was able to recruit Dr. Vedder to be with us here today. Just to give you a little background, for the last 50 years he's been a professor at Ohio University, and I think there's a good lesson there. A long tenure in your career is important and allows you to achieve the maximum from your own career, but also in contributions to the world. Professor Vedder is one of the leading scholars on the economies of higher education. For those of you who don't know, he released a book this week called Restoring the Promise. Very interesting book. He's written hundreds of articles for Wall Street Journal, Forbes, National Review, Washington Times, and he's the founder of the Center for College Affordability. That sounds like a really great idea, Professor. I hope it works. He's advised many policymakers over the years, including Congress, presidents, governors, etc., with good, solid advice. Beyond publishing, Professor Vedder has been recognized with superior teaching and devotion to his students. Two of his students are here today, which shows you a great outcome. He received his PhD in economics from the University of Illinois. What I really like about Professor Vedder is, number one, he's courageous. There's a limited number of very courageous people in our country today, and it takes courage to make a difference in this world. He's also a continuous learner, a reader, a thinker. He practices Kertner's alertness. He pays attention, connects the dots, sees the longer term. I'm very honored to introduce you today. Welcome, Professor Richard Vedder.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Luddy. I'm delighted to be here today. I believe one of the nation's greatest academic needs is more civil discussion and debate on the issues of the day. Should we increase or decrease legal immigration to the United States? Should we have free college or not? Was the United States mistaken to renounce the Paris Climate Change Accord? Should we put tariffs on Chinese goods? These and many other issues deserve discussion and debate, and I wish our colleges and universities would spend more time promoting debates, such as the one that we're having here today. And I wish they'd spend less time in protests and efforts that actually suppress the free discussion of ideas. That's the hallmark of both good college education and American representative democracy. So I applaud the Coolidge Foundation for their efforts and Mr. Luddy for his support of this very noble endeavor. Now, the debate resolution before us today relates to the benefits of college education to the cost of that education. Let me briefly comment on college costs and why they're so high. In 1840, well before even Calvin Coolidge was born, the tuition fee for attending the University of North Carolina was $50. Somewhat higher than at Princeton, but less than at Harvard or the University of Virginia, where it was $75. Now, when I began teaching at Ohio University in 1965, when my calculation, most of the debaters here were about minus 37 years old, the tuition fee was $450, which in today's dollars, correcting for inflation, would be less than $4,000. At my university today, the actual tuition fee is triple that, more than triple that. And that's commonplace universities all over the country. From 1840, the first date I mentioned, to about 1978, tuition fees went up about 1% a year. Excuse me, I'm not using a PowerPoint. I'm old-fashioned. I call this West Virginia PowerPoint. I use my fingers. Things were going up 1% a year. Prices of college were going up 1% a year, more than the overall inflation rate. Since 1978, they've been going up around 3% a year, triple that rate. And when you compound something over time at 3%, you get enormous results. I calculated that if the tuition fees in the last 40 years had been going up like they had been going up earlier, 1% a year, tuition fees today would be roughly half of what they actually are. And I doubt we would even be having this debate, because college costs wouldn't be that big of a deal to deserve a debate. But why then did fees rise so much? Why? In 1987, the Secretary of Education, William Vedder, hypothesized that college fees were being pushed up by the federal student financial assistance programs. Kids could borrow money they needed for their fees, so the colleges, seeing that, raised their fees far more aggressively than they otherwise would have. And the evidence from studies done by the New York Federal Reserve Bank and also by a prestigious organization, the National Bureau of Economic Research, says that for every $1 of additional aid a student gets from the federal government, tuition fees go up somewhere between 60 and 65 cents. In other words, the majority of that tuition loan money is really captured by the colleges, not by the students. This suggests the schools get the bulk of the money and benefits, not the students. And what have the colleges done with this money? Aha, that's the interesting thing. I'm the beneficiary of some of this, by the way. They've gone on an academic arms race. They hire armies of administrators, so many that the typical school today has more non-teaching administrative support personnel than professors. The University of Michigan, as of last year, had 93 diversity coordinators, whatever that is, policing the race and gender and sexual orientation and other characteristics of the students and faculty to be sure that they had a mix that seemed to be approximately politically correct. 50 years ago, the number was 0, from 0 to 93. Universities will also increase the top pay of officials, the pay of top officials. They've offered senior faculty lower teaching loads. They've given the students a few amenities that they didn't used to have, like climbing walls or lazy rivers and buildings with fancy atriums. I am told, for example, that High Point University, which is located less than 100 miles away, students at High Point who drive their cars to class can have them valet parked. They have valet parking at High Point. And they also have they have a really swanky upscale restaurant. You can take your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever to, your dog to, whatever. And it's very, very, very fancy. 4- to 5-star restaurant. So if the Vedder hypothesis is correct, and I believe it is, the federal student loan program is perhaps the best example of what sometimes is called the law of unintended consequences. The loan programs largely arose out of something called the Higher Education Act of 1965 and were designed to improve access to college for students from low-income families, for whom college was a huge financial burden. Yet the sky-high tuition fees that arose out of these programs have led to low-income kids staying away from college. They're scared by these high tuition fees. They also have to fill out something called the FAFSA form, which is 120 questions long, in order to be eligible to get financial aid. So the proportion of recent college graduates from the bottom 1/4 of the income distribution is less today than it was in 1970 when these programs were in their infancy. The government, the federal government, is the biggest enemy of low-income students in America. So that said, many high school students still clamor to go to college. Colleges are a screening device, a way for employers to assess the ability of potential new workers to handle responsible jobs. College graduates on average are more intelligent, harder working, more dependable, and more reliable than those with lesser education. There's something called the sheepskin effect. The minute you get a piece of paper saying you have a college degree, your value to employers rises substantially. George Washington University economist Brian Kaplan authored a book recently called The Case Against Education that argues that most of the higher earnings of college graduates, compared with those with just a high school diploma, results from not from what they learn in college, but from the screening device effects of having that piece of paper. They were smarter to begin with. College didn't do much to change that. He makes a good point. It's very interesting that one reason why the sheepskin effect is so great is a result of a court decision that arose out of something that happened right here a few miles away in North Carolina. The Supreme Court in 1971, in the case called Griggs versus Duke Power, in a unanimous decision, effectively outlawed businesses testing their potential employees for their competency, to measure their competency, because it was declared to have a disparate impact on racial minorities in violation of the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So this court decision served, and some follow-up actions made it problematic for employers to engage in testing of potential workers. It didn't prohibit them, however, from asking applicants about what their education is. So a college diploma took on enhanced value. Now let me turn more directly to the proposition today that you're going to be debating. How would I answer the question, do the benefits of obtaining a bachelor's degree outweigh the costs to students and their families? Surprisingly, I would not give a straightforward yes or no answer, but would say sometimes. For many individuals, college is a good investment, with benefits outweighing the costs, while for others, it is not. For all students and their families, going to college is virtually like all other kinds of financial investments, one that has some risks associated. In order to earn rewards, you have to deal with risks. And that's true of college as anything else. Look at the entire population, looking at it. The federal data say that roughly 60% of those who enter college full-time graduate within 6 years, not 4 years, 6 years, 60%. The 4-year graduation rate's even lower, less than 50%. Of those 60% who do graduate within 6 years, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York tells us that about 40% of that 60% group will become what is called underemployed shortly after college graduation. An underemployed person may be someone who is literally can't get a job, but more often it's someone who simply doesn't want to work, or even more often than that, someone who gets a job doing something usually done by high school graduates. Working as a barista at Starbucks, working at a Home Depot or Walmart store in a non-managerial role, serving as a home health care aide, becoming an Uber driver, perhaps doing unskilled construction labor, something like that. The dropout in the underemployment data put together suggests that only roughly 36% of the kids who enter a four-year college full-time actually end up getting a relatively high-skilled job in the managerial, technical, or professional field sometime soon after their graduation. The other 64%, in some sense, fail to achieve their objective. Even those numbers are something of a overly optimistic because those numbers are based on a 6-year graduation rate, and kids expect to graduate in 4 years. And if they put their mind to it, they could usually graduate in 3. But they take 6, 5, or 6. And these statistics I've just been giving you are based on averages of the whole population. And people have personal characteristics that often vary a lot. It's hard to define a perfectly typical human being. Girls are different than boys. Isn't that profound? Smart kids are different than those with lower levels of cognitive skills. We even rejoice in these human differences. It's the spice of life. It's at the very creation of new human beings comes from these differences. Vive la différence. But take a very good student going to a good charter school like the one that we're attending where we are right now today, a student who has been accepted for admission to Harvard University. The 6-year graduation rate at Harvard is 97%. 97% of the kids graduate. My guess is that rather than 40% being underemployed after graduation, it's probably more like 10% at Harvard. So if those numbers are right, then about 87% of the kids who enter Harvard actually end up graduating and getting jobs associated with a college degree. The federal government's college scorecard, which you can look up easily on your cell phone, on your smartphone, shows that the average earnings after attending Harvard are $89,700 a year. Dramatically more than what an average American worker makes. For those students who are accepted, going to Harvard probably is the equivalent of hitting a home run in baseball. The risks associated with attending, while not zero or above zero, are relatively modest, and the rewards are substantial. So it makes a lot of sense to go. But now let's take a so-so student who graduates from maybe just above average in their high school class from a so-so public high school in North or South Carolina, but manages to get into, let's say, the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. The 6-year graduation rate there is 55%. 45% don't make it, 55%. And I suspect the underemployment rate there is probably close to 50%. So if these numbers are right, fewer than 28% of the students entering UNC Greensboro both graduate in a timely manner and get a job traditionally filled by college graduates. Some 72% fail to achieve the dream of graduating and promptly getting a top-flight job. Moreover, the college scorecard data shows the average pay after attending UNC Greensboro is not $89,000 a year, $37,500, or under $20 an hour for a full-time worker employed year-round. Why are they going there? Beats me. Anyway, think about that. Moreover, 45% of Greensboro attendees with student loans have failed to pay down any of their student loan debt. That's what the data say. UNC Greensboro is not Harvard. Attending UNC Greensboro is a much riskier investment than attending Harvard. Does that mean no one should go there? Not necessarily, but it means it's a lot riskier. Moreover, engineering and accounting majors have a more financially rewarding post-college career than gender studies or sociology majors. Some payscale.com data that I've seen suggests that the early earnings of electrical engineers just after getting out of college is around $70,000 a year typically, compared with under $40,000 for those majoring in psychology or music. So what you study makes a great deal of difference as well. Students who do well in college fare better vocationally than those who do not. Statistics that are averages for groups often fail to convey these important differences. Now, these vast differences in results, according to the type of school, explain several things. They explain why most students applying to Harvard are actually turned down by Harvard. And Harvard isn't worried about the decline in the birth rate leading to an enrollment crisis anytime, because everyone's clamoring to go to Harvard because of the good return on investment there. The good results for Harvard and other high-quality schools in this state, I would include Duke, UNC, Chapel Hill, Wake Forest, Davidson. The high return, good results for these schools show why people are almost desperate to try to get their kids into these schools. Even in some cases, bribing unscrupulous individuals to try to provide colleges with false information, leading to the admission of otherwise inadmissible students. You don't hear about huge admission scandals and bribery attempts regarding East Carolina University, or the University of North Carolina Greensboro, or Appalachian State. People don't bribe their way to get into Appalachian State. They bribe to get their way into Harvard if they can. Some people unscrupulously, immoral, inappropriately do, illegally do. So attending these lower quality schools, perceived lower quality schools, is clearly a far less, provides a far less certain high rate of investment with low risk. As the cost of colleges rises and the risks become more apparent to the general public, the demand for higher education has declined somewhat. Enrollments for all of higher education, including community colleges, in the year that just ended, is just ending right now, are lower than what they were 7 years ago. The first such drop over that long of a time period in essentially what's peacetime in American history. We've never had anything like it. Governments have shielded universities from something that the great Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter aptly described as creative destruction. In the business world, new technologies, changing tastes, the changing availability of resources, and other things impact on what goods and services we should produce. Markets discipline firms in the competitive free market environment to strive to produce things that people want and to reduce costs so that their prices remain competitive. Companies who fail to change to meet consumer needs die, or at least severely damaged. 20 years ago, Eastman Kodak was a powerful American corporation. Today, it is a very small shadow of its former self. It still exists. Because it failed to foresee the impact that changing technology would have on the economy. It just failed to miss the boat. Companies die from failures to meet the needs of people, given our limited human resources, while other companies flourish while coming out with new ideas that people like. Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook, and Microsoft did not exist 50 years ago. The companies didn't exist. Today, collectively, those 5 companies are worth $4 trillion. Rewards and punishment. Creative destruction serves a useful function. Some businesses have to die to maintain the dynamic nature of the American economy. We today probably need to let some universities die. Ones that are overly costly and deliver low value for the services rendered. I predict that even with government interfering in the process of what we actually call the invisible hand, the market forces, I predict at least 500 colleges and universities will die in the next decade. Maybe more than that. These will be dead colleges. In some ways, I call them the Grateful Dead. You don't want to listen to a person who is, I did a calculation, I am almost twice the square root of the age of the average student in attendance here. And you don't want to hear me pontificate for a whole hour, which I've been given. I've written elaborately about these problems and many other things, stuff like scandals surrounding collegiate athletics and so on and so forth. In my book, Restoring the Promise, that Mr. Luddy mentioned. The book is 400 pages long. It would take me hours and hours to tell you everything in the book, so I'm not going to even try. So let's stop now and let's talk about some of these things. Do you have any questions for me? Do you agree that perhaps both sides of this debate have a point? And sometimes college is worth it, and sometimes it is not. Do you think, like I do, that maybe the federal intervention in higher ed, very well intended, perhaps turned out far less positively than originally intended? These questions and other questions like this abound. So let's stop now and let's have a little discussion of some of this. So ask me something. I am open up. Are there any of you who are brave enough and smart enough and courageous enough to ask me something? I'd love to chat about this.
Are you a Grateful Dead fan?
Pardon?
Are you a Grateful Dead fan?
No, I know very little about the Grateful Dead. That was, for some of you, probably, that was a rather well-known musical group of many decades ago. Yeah. Any other? Yes, sir.
If you believe that all these colleges are there's to say, continuous loop of more debt and more spending, why do you believe that students continue to apply?
Why do kids continue to apply? You know, that's a good question. Why do they? Well, for a lot of them, it still has a payoff. For a lot of people say, look, I'm above average. I can do it. Okay, maybe 40-50% of the kids flunk out and don't do it. But I'm part of that 40 or 50% who can do it. And it's worth it for me. And there's another reason. By the way, what's your name? Pardon? I didn't hear it, but anyway, that's my hearing problem. Forget it. But thank you for the question. But here's another aspect. There's more to going to college than getting a job. There's more to going to college than making a lot of money. Some people want to go to college and do things, say be a school teacher. And they know they're not going to make a huge amount of money in life, but they think of it as a satisfying career. My wife over here taught or has gotten counsel for, I don't know, 120 years or something, forever. And a very rewarding career. Another thing is some people go to college, and maybe it's not fashionable to say, but it has an element of truth. There's another dimension to going to college. You go to college partly to enjoy yourself. You go to college partly to have fun. You go to college to socialize. You go to college to make new friends. So there are other aspects of college life, which I freely acknowledge. It's, for some people, these things are very important. But it is risky. And it is true, kids are still going to college, but they're going less and they're applying less. Any other questions? Yes, sir, in the back. Yes, gentlemen.
So at what point do you think is the tipping point for a college degree, based on the fact that employers today won't even look at people if they don't have a college degree, and just that using that as criteria, right? So if there's so many people applying for a job, they won't even look at candidates that don't have a college degree. At what value or what tipping point does that college degree become worthless based on the jobs that are available?
Well, one thing, what's the tipping point? I expect the tipping point, that varies from individual to individual. It depends on the individual's individual characteristics and desires and so forth. But one thing it is true is we have 1.5 million people, fewer people going to college today than we did in 2011. 1.5 million people. So there is already, you could say in one sense, the tipping point is already, we're starting to see that. More and more people are starting to say, why am I doing this? There's a guy with dirty jobs. Who's? Mike Rowe. I've been on TV shows with Mike Rowe. Great guy, by the way. I love the guy. Mike Rowe, and there's another guy who's written a book, a guy with a PhD in physics who now is a motorcycle mechanic. He decided, I didn't like what I was doing, and I've changed my mind. And so people used to glamorize, you've got to go to college, you've got to go to college. President Obama's told us, you have to go to college. President Bush before that, you got to go to college. College for all. You're a failure in life unless you go to college. That was the message. The message is starting to change. People are starting to say, I know college graduates who are working at the local grocery store. I know college graduates, I know kids who went to college who have $50,000 in debt, and they're not graduated from college, and they're living in their parents' basements, and they can't afford to get married, and they can't afford to have children, and they can't afford to buy a house, and they're miserable. Not everyone's that way, but there are people like that. So the word is getting out. We are reaching this tipping point, and so enrollments have started to fall. Now, so what's starting to happen? One, tuition fees aren't going up quite like they were. To get students, schools are making deals. Well, we'll give you a discount on your tuition. The average discount at a private liberal arts college in the United States now is 50%. 50%. If the stated tuition is $40,000 a year, good chances you'll only end up paying about $20,000. So that's one thing that's happening. Second thing's happening, schools are starting to close. They are actually closing. Up in northeastern part of the country, Vermont, places like that, they're closing like crazy. There are a lot of colleges closing. Some fairly famous ones. Hampshire College is a pretty well-known college up there, is closing. And others. A few years ago in Virginia, Sweetbriar was going to close. That was actually a fairly prestigious school with a fair amount of endowment. They managed to keep open, but they're struggling. So even prestigious schools in some cases are in trouble. So the markets are starting to work, but the government keeps them from working because it drops subsidies on these schools and say, keep in business, keep in business. Whereas in the business sector, we say goodbye. And we say, you lose. But others gain, because as Eastman Kodak loses, and Apple, Apple is booming. So, I take pictures with this now instead of with a camera, and that's why Apple stock. I made a bundle of money on Apple stock. My basis is 43 cents a share, by the way. Not a bad deal. And so I love Apple. Kodak, I also own Kodak, and I'm very angry at that. It all balances out.
With the change in digital education and looking at programs like Khan Academy, where do you see, and organizations like Apple or Amazon saying that they want skills and they're willing to hire programmers that have the skills before a college education, where do you see colleges switching their educational programs to in order to better prepare the type of workers that these colleges or these programs and companies are looking for?
Higher education is notoriously slow in adopting to new technology. Why do we even need to go to college? Why can't you just take a test at the end of your 4 years of college? Like you take to go into college, you will be soon taking some. You may have already taken the SAT test or the ACT test. You take various tests in schooling. You take tests all the time. That's what school's all about. Test, test, test. Why don't we have a test at the end of your high school career that tests you on both general knowledge and your critical thinking skills? We should be able to devise a test that correlates pretty well with a typical college graduate. Why do we need to go to college at all? Why don't we have alternatives? Why don't we let kids get credit from the courses they take at Khan Academy? Or why don't we, these MOOCs, massively online, massively open online courses, take? Why don't we give credit for those? Some schools are starting to do that, but there's a good argument that we should do more with that. Online education is being utilized more and more, and I would predict that would continue to happen. But I think there is, without the profit incentive, colleges are notoriously slow to react. I have no incentives to teach differently. I've been teaching the same course for 55 years, 54, and 55 in the fall. You were minus 37 or something when I started teaching this class. I teach it the same way I did 50-some years ago. Why didn't I change? Why don't I use much more online stuff? Why don't I do much more use some course materials that are previously unavailable because of the new technology? No one's paying me to do it. I like the old way I'm doing it. I like to hear myself talk. Why do I want to hear someone else talk? I can hear myself. And I'm God's gift to the humanity when it comes to talking. So I love to hear myself talk. So I don't change. And Schumpeter's creative destruction is the same thing that another guy named Clayton Christensen talks about disruptive innovation. We need more disruptive innovation in higher ed. And one form of these charter schools, such as this one, is a form of disruptive innovation. It's offering an alternative to monopoly public schools. We need more of that. We need more competition. I didn't fully answer your question, but there are several people here who want to ask questions. So please, next person.
Go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
So it's just a quick question, but what would happen to the highly skilled jobs?
Step into the mic a little bit. Yeah, we can't hear you.
What would happen to the highly skilled jobs if people stopped getting degrees for them?
What would happen to highly skilled jobs if what?
People stopped getting degrees for them.
Stop getting degrees?
Yeah.
Well, the degrees themselves are pieces of paper. Let's remember that. Do you need that piece of paper? That's the question. The jobs are there, and we need people to fill them. If the pay is high enough, people will take them, degree or no degree. But it is true, the piece of paper is a screening device. Remember that. It's in I saw some of your prep materials you were given. It's a piece of paper. I, John Jones, Joanna Jones, have a Bachelor of Arts degree from High Point University. Okay. That means probably this person with this piece of paper is pretty smart. They wouldn't have gotten all the way through without it. Probably means she's or he is fairly hardworking, hard enough working at least to be able to persist to get that degree. Probably honest, doesn't steal too much or too dishonest, because if that had happened, they probably would have ended up in an unhappy ending earlier in life, in jail or something. So the fact that this person has this piece of paper says to employers, this person's probably pretty good, at least let's give them consideration. In the old days, the employers would give them a test of their own to design and fill their own specific needs. But the government says, oh no, you do that, it might, some groups of people might not do as well on the test as others, and therefore we can't do that, which is, in my opinion, a mistake. But that's public policy. So, but I do think we may find new ways of certifying competency. We may start having a national test. We might start saying, why spend all this money to get this piece of paper? If kids in college are spending 27 hours a week studying or going to class, and that's what the statistics say. You high school students and you middle school students spend more hours in class or studying than the average college student, if you believe the U.S. Department of Labor data. If you believe that, you are already at the peak of your lifetime in terms of study. You'll learn more later on. You'll learn more advanced materials. Now, that's not true of every individual. Matt Denhart over here is a former student of mine. And Matt Denhart studied more than 27 hours a week. That's why he's here. Because he's smart and he's hardworking. He had discipline. But I have other students who didn't spend even 27 hours a week, and some of them graduated from college, I must say. Oh, another thing. We give A's to everyone. Or B pluses. Their average grade at my university and at any university, up to say Chapel Hill or NC State, B plus, B minus, some form of B. When I went to school, it was some form of C. When Mr. Luddy went to school, we went to school roughly, we went to school in the golden decade of the 60s. It was a C. Gentleman's C, we even heard. A typical student in a freshman class earned about a C. Some earned D. I gave a lot of D's and F's. They don't have it today, so kids don't work as hard. They don't have to. No incentive. One of the problems is we need to sharpen the incentive system and hire. Another question. Are we all right?
I think we have about 5 minutes or
Yeah. One more question or two more? Yeah.
Need 2 quick ones?
Yes, sir. Ethan. It is.
Morning.
Ethan. See, I even know his name. Aren't I smart?
Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Ethan.
So, my question is, I was wondering, how else would someone go about signifying their competence to potential employers if they didn't have a college degree?
If you don't have a college degree, how do you signify? Well, what work experiences do you have? One thing. Work experiences, references, are just another form of certifying competency. You ask, well, I worked at McDonald's last summer. What do the people at McDonald's think? Did this person show up to work on time? Was this person honest and trustworthy? Was this person efficient? And so forth. So you look at other ways of measuring competency, and one, of course, trying true witness, look at references from jobs. But a lot of kids go out, don't have much experience. They don't have much work experience yet. And you can't say, oh, I mowed my lawn for my neighbors pretty well. That is a little lame. And it might work, but I wouldn't count on it. So you need some sort of measurement. That's why I said if you had some sort of testing, there are kids who don't graduate from high school who take something called the GED. And the GED, it's an imperfect test, but it's some measure of achieving the equivalent of a high school diploma. And maybe we need some sort of something like that. And you can also, for some people, what's wrong with becoming a welder? What do people have against welding? Welders make what, $80,000, $100,000 a year? It requires some skill, but you can learn those skills in less than a year and become a good welder. So some people probably ought to consider career colleges or programs. Learn how to drive an 18-wheel truck. There's shortages of those drivers right now, I'm told by many people. So, I think some people should think in terms of alternatives to the traditional college education. There's nothing wrong with these jobs. There's nothing immoral about these jobs. Indeed, they're good, honest jobs, and I think they deserve some consideration. So college is an answer for a lot of people, but it's not the answer for all of you. And I look forward to hearing you talk about, I've been talking for almost an hour here. I'm an old man, I gotta sit down. I want to hear you people talk, and I want to hear your debate, and I'm looking forward to it, and thank you very much.